sweet friends, to my podcast, Loss and Healing. It's a podcast dedicated to navigating the profound journey of miscarriage grief. I'm your host, Dr. Rachna, and I'm honored to be your guide as we explore the delicate landscape of loss, healing, and hope. So today we're going to dive into the topic of boundaries. Now, I always want to say this. If any of the information that I share triggers you, I want you to pause, take a step back, and go take care of yourself. And then come back to the podcast when you're ready. Now, the topic of boundaries can feel complicated, and it may even make you feel a bit anxious as you listen to this today. Now, I'm going to begin with this quote that I heard a while back. It says, "Boundaries are not about shutting people out. They're about creating space for your healing to breathe." Now, I want you to listen to each word again and let it sink in. Boundaries are not about shutting people out. They're about creating space for your healing to breathe. Now, friends, I feel that for the most of us, we fall into one of these three bubbles. One, we have just a few boundaries. Two, we have too many boundaries. And three, we have no boundaries at all. So in this podcast today, I really wanted to have a conversation about what it feels like to have boundaries after a miscarriage. All right, we need to have boundaries when it comes to our healing and the time that you need to find that healing and not feel pressured to answer every question that comes at you after a miscarriage. So we want to talk about boundaries around your recovery, physical, boundaries around relationships, boundaries around your emotional healing, boundaries around your well-being and self-care, right? Because when we can create these safe boundaries for ourselves, we can have some time to breathe. We can have some time to rest and then figure out what your next steps are going to be. Because I feel strongly about this, that without these boundaries in place, it can feel very unstable after a miscarriage. Because there's so much happening and our mind and our bodies are trying to connect back together, but the outside world tells us to move on as quickly as possible. So when we talk about the boundaries today, I want you to keep in mind this, that there's no one way of doing this. There's no one specific boundary that you have to have. I want you to just think about how you have been able to process your miscarriage so far, whether it happened 10 years ago, 10 days ago, 1 day ago. And what are those things that you feel you need for yourself to keep moving forward with your healing without feeling this external pressure and even that internal pressure that we put on ourselves to hurry the healing, to hurry the time, to get to the next pregnancy, to get to the next busy thing so that we don't think about the loss that you have suffered. And something else I want you to keep in the back of your mind is this. People are not going to know what your boundaries are unless you are willing to communicate those boundaries with them. Now, so many people who want to support you are coming from a place of compassion and care, and they're coming from their own experiences and own knowledge of what they think happens after a miscarriage. So unless I am willing to say, hey, today I just don't feel like talking about this. Could we talk about something else? They're not going to know how to show up for you. So understanding that the way I communicate those boundaries is important. I want you to be able to say what you need and what kind of support you are desiring from your loved ones, from your friends, from your partner. So as we talk about boundaries today, I want you to keep this in the back of your mind, is that how will I communicate these gentle boundaries with others so that I can feel free from obligation of having to share things that I just don't want to. So let's start by talking about some physical boundaries. Now, physical boundaries is just not about sex, okay? It can be any type of touch that perhaps you are not comfortable with right now. I'll share myself about myself that after my miscarriages, I had a hard time people just being too close to me, whether it was by a hug or too close in my personal space. And to be honest, I did not know what to say. I didn't have those boundaries. So as I went through my first miscarriage, second miscarriage, third miscarriage, I learned gently to say something when perhaps even someone wanted to give me a hug, or if they were a little too close to me, I learned gently to just say, I'm just not ready for that right now. Or for me, just taking a gentle step back if I felt a bit too close to someone right after a miscarriage. Because I was trying to figure out what was happening in my body and get used to this idea that I'm no longer pregnant. Even though my body was in some ways telling me I still was, I just needed to figure myself out. But in our society, we feel that putting a boundary down means we're shutting others out. And again, I want to go back to the quote in the beginning. It's not about that. It's about creating a space for yourself so that you can feel grounded, stable, and secure. So that being said, I want you to think about, what can I say to a friend who automatically always just wants to give me a hug because that's part of her love language? Can I just say something like, hey, I know you love me and you want to give me a hug, and right now, it's not a but, it's an and, because both of those statements are true. That I am just not ready for any physical touch right now. So could we just sit together and have a cup of tea? And this also kind of connects to your partner, right? Being able to say what you need. Like, honey, I'm just not ready for that physical intimacy right now. But I would love it if we can just cuddle, if we could just hold hands so that I can still feel connected to you. This is part of the healing that takes place once you start putting a boundary down that makes you feel grounded in yourself and just being able to express your needs in those moments. Because I'll say something. When I did share some of these boundaries with a few close friends, they were very respectful, loving, and kind, and they understood. But before I said those things, they had no idea what I needed. So again, going back to communicating and saying it out loud and not be afraid of the reaction that you may get. Another part of physical boundary is also protecting your personal space and protecting your energy, right? You may not feel like you want to go out to parties or be around other people or talk openly in a social situation. So how do I reserve my personal energy? How do I allow time for rest so that I don't feel this pressure to always just show up like I used to? And in those moments, I just want you to think about putting yourself as a priority. Because I bet for a very long time, you have just been showing up for others over and over again and putting yourself last. But my friends, let me tell you something. Right now is the time for you to put yourself first. Because if you're not okay, you can't show up for anyone else. So I need you to protect your space, protect your energy, and be able to communicate what you need in direct, simple language. You don't have to explain. You don't have to feel like you have to justify your reasoning. It's a boundary. And we have to learn to communicate those. And it's a gentle boundary. Right? I always want you to think that. And boundaries can shift depending on how you are feeling. And when we think about putting boundaries down, I wonder how many of you feel a sense of guilt, as if you are abandoning others, right? But I really want you to think about this instead. I want you to reframe that. By putting a boundary down to take care of myself, I'm not abandoning myself. I am prioritizing myself, and people will understand. And those who don't, okay, you can take a step back and figure out how to continue that relationship later. So it's okay when you have plans to say, you know what, my friend, I'm going to take a few days to rest, or I'm just having a week where I just don't have much energy, so I'll need to reschedule our plans. Right? So I want you to think about what are some of those statements you can say to others when putting a boundary down. Now let's kind of dive into boundaries around your emotions. Because here's the thing, in my experience, when women have miscarriages, and if they have shared it with others, there could be so many questions coming at them. Such as, what happened? Did you do something? Are you going to try right away? What about, your future pregnancy? What are you going to do? Are you guys going to be ready soon? Right? We want grandkids. All of these questions that come at you, and you may feel almost, I picture it as feeling like you're backed up against a wall and you just want to push back and say, leave me alone. I just want to be by myself and heal. Right? So how do I communicate that I need time to deal with my emotions? And I know we have talked a lot about the emotions that come after a miscarriage. So how do you communicate to others that you need time, you need space, you need rest for your heart, for your mind, for your soul, to just acknowledge the pain you have gone through and to prioritize how to move forward with care and gentleness for yourself. Right? So think about, what are those things I can say? If somebody calls you today and says, hey, I just want to say how sorry I am about your miscarriage. Tell me what I can do. What happened? What did the doctor say? Are you guys going to try again? Okay, you can just say, you know what, my friend, I appreciate your care and support. And right now, I am just not up to discussing this. Can I share updates later? Or actually, you know what? You don't even have to say it as a question. You just say, I will share updates later when I'm ready. Right now, I just want to sit and not feel like I have to share things I'm not ready to, because I myself am trying to understand what's happening and dealing with my grief. Right then and there, my hope is that your friends are able to just say, I hear you, and I am still going to show up for you however you need me to. Now, those are the people you want around you. If you feel the pressure and if people still continue to push that boundary of yours, it's okay to say, I will check in when I'm ready. So I would appreciate it if you don't ask me any more questions today. What I have learned in my life after having gone through 3 miscarriages is repetitive statements can make a difference in people taking a step back from asking too much. Now, if I try to explain too much about why I want to set a boundary, how I'm feeling over and over again, sometimes it just feels like I'm going around in circles, right? So instead, maybe think about saying the same thing over and over again. Hey, I appreciate your care and support. I'm not ready to share right now. If they ask again, say the same thing again. And hopefully, after the 3rd or 4th time, they will understand that, okay, then right now is not the right time. Okay? So social boundaries can also be, when do I attend events and when do I don't attend certain events? I find that baby showers are the hardest to attend after a miscarriage, because you yourself had a hope that you would be celebrating your pregnancy, your child, at a baby shower. Now, I always want to say this, it doesn't matter if you have other children. I'm talking about the loss that you had, right? You had a hope and a dream for this newborn baby to come, and that's not coming true any longer. So how do I take care of my social boundary? Can I say no to events? Can I give myself the permission to call my friend and say, I love you and I am just having a really hard time and I won't be able to come to the baby shower, but can I spend time with you one-on-one and just celebrate you when I'm ready? And I hope that the friends in your life will understand that. The loved ones in your life will say, yeah, of course. This is absolutely devastating what you're going through. And yes, we can celebrate later. Now, I know some of these things I'm talking about can be, it's an ideal situation for when you do share these boundaries. And I always want to say, if people cannot understand that, if they can't understand that you are not able to show up for certain events, maybe take a step back. Because I am still going to say that you need to take care of yourself first. Please don't force yourself to go somewhere when you're not ready for it. It's only going to make you feel worse, make you feel guilty, or make you feel, just heighten the grief so much more. So just think about, what are some other ways I can show up for my loved ones and friends and not isolate myself from them, but rather communicate what I'm going through and what I need right now. And another side of this is, and I have clients ask me this so many times, is that they say, Rachna, I'm tired of sharing. I'm tired of constantly going over and over again with people what happened. And it just doesn't feel like I'm moving forward. It just feels like I'm stuck. So I want you to think about something is, if you have shared it with people that you were pregnant and now you have to share that you've had a loss, I want you to think about, how can I let my loved ones know without feeling like I have to share it over and over again? A few people have actually shared with me that, they had a group call with their close friends so that they didn't have to share it individually and feel that grief come up over and over. So maybe it's a group call, maybe it's a group text, because talking about it is too much. Maybe you have a gathering of your few close friends who you shared it with, and you let them know so that they can right then and there support you. And then you can also practice letting them know what your boundaries are then. Whether you are okay talking about it, whether you need space, or whether you just need a hug or just someone to sit and have a cup of tea with. So it's really important for you to think about, how do I continue to share my loss with others whom I love and who need to know what happened without feeling this obligation to share it over and over again. Now let's talk about another type of boundary, which is with your medical team. And I think this could be a whole other podcast on its own, but I just want to briefly talk about how to communicate what you need to your medical team. Now, unfortunately, so many times we are so disappointed in the medical care that we receive after a miscarriage has happened. A lot of the times I've heard, and I've done research on this around the world, to be honest, women are just told, go home and rest. Just go home and rest. There's barely any acknowledgement of the pain, the emotional heartbreak that comes for so many women. I just remember my own, where I sat in the hospital room and I just cried without anyone there to console me. It is a very lonely place for women after they've had a miscarriage. We feel like we're on a lonely planet for most of us. And I sure hope that, and I know actually for a fact that there are some women out there who've had a positive experience after, where they felt cared for and were shown compassion. So when we talk about boundaries with our medical team, I want to just say a few things around that, is that communicate what you need. Please don't be shy about that. Now we know that miscarriage is managed by medical doctors in a few different ways, whether it's the expectant management where the body passes the tissue naturally, whether you're given medication or perhaps you even had to have surgery. Unfortunately for me, I went through each one of those for my 3 miscarriages, and I'm sure some of you have experienced what I did as well. But here's the thing. I was young. I was naive. I didn't know what to ask for. So as I have gotten more educated around this topic of miscarriages and what happens afterwards, I am learning that it is crucial to understand what procedures are available, what medication is available, and how doctors manage the miscarriage after. So I don't want you to feel hesitant about asking for what you need. Understand fully what options are available for you. That's part of setting a boundary, is not feeling like you just have to do what they're telling you to do. Ask different questions. Ask for side effects. Ask what you can do afterwards, what therapy options are available for you, what groups are available, if any, in your area that can be helpful in dealing with the grief afterwards. I feel that so many times, miscarriages get put into the category of, well, it's just so common. You just go home and rest and you'll be fine and you can try again. Not fully understanding the emotional impact and the heaviness that comes for women in the aftermath of a miscarriage. So don't be shy. Ask for what you need. Ask for understanding. Ask for support. Ask for compassion. You deserve that, and you need that, especially from your doctors, who are most of the time the first responders after a miscarriage happens, right? Now, the last boundary I want to talk about is boundaries for yourself. The way you treat yourself after a miscarriage, the way you speak to yourself, the way you take care of yourself. I want you to think about, what are those things that I am doing, I am saying for myself, to myself, that help me heal rather than make me feel like I've done something wrong. Because my friends, my sweet, sweet friends, you have done nothing wrong to cause this. I cannot say that enough. Please do not sit in that guilt. I want you to instead reflect and think about, how am I treating myself today? How am I taking care of myself today? Have I even asked myself what I need right now? Right? So I want you to think about, what are those inner boundaries that I can have so that I'm not negatively talking to myself. Instead, I would rather you say, you know what, I do not understand why this happened, but I am going to do everything I can to take care of myself. Or after I listen to this podcast, I'm going to go for a walk because I need that and I want to take care of me. So as we have talked about so many of these boundaries today, and please know, this is not a one podcast topic. This is a continuous topic that we will talk about in most of the podcasts that I'm able to share with you. And my goal next time is to have a guest come and share their experience after a miscarriage, because I think it's important to hear from other people and what they have gone through, what they have found helpful and maybe not so helpful. So my hope today is that you are taking time to show yourself compassion, love, and care. And also think about, what are those boundaries that you want to put in place so that you can continue to heal from this pain, from this trauma that you have gone through. And as always, my friends, remember that every heartbeat matters, no matter how small. It has been an absolute pleasure to sit with you today, and an honor to be able to share my thoughts around boundaries. Again, this is Dr. Rachna, and if you feel that this episode could benefit somebody else, I would encourage you to share it. And I look forward to our very first guest at our next episode. Please take care of yourself, and I will see you all next time.